Script for the film strip, The Resurrection. The man whose words of teaching and healing during his short time on earth increase in power and influence for each one of us as the years goes by. His is the greatest story ever told, for all men, for all nations. Each of the writers of the Gospel tell us of the great event which took place early in the morning of the Sunday we now call Easter. That morning, Jesus rose from the dead. 3 empty crosses remained on Golgotha, the hill where Jesus and the 2 robbers had been crucified. The body of Jesus had been taken away and laid in a new tomb owned by Joseph of Arimathea. Members of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish authorities who had arrested and tried Jesus, went again to the Roman governor Pilate to request that the tomb in which the body of Jesus was placed be firmly sealed and guarded. They told him it had been said that Jesus would rise from the dead on the 3rd day. They also suggested that if the tomb were not guarded night and day, his followers might be able to steal the body and then say that Jesus had risen from the dead. Pilate gave his permission. The priests quickly hurried to the tomb with guards to make sure the great rock covered the entrance. They bound it with ropes and sealed it. Then one of the priests pressed his ring into the wax so that if the seal was broken, it would be more easily discovered. With the tomb firmly sealed and the guard ready to stand by, the priests now felt secure. Now it would be impossible for anyone to enter the tomb or remove the body. As they started to leave the tomb, they took one last look at the entrance. With their work now finished and with Pilate's guard to watch at all times, they could report to Caiaphas that the last had been heard of this man Jesus. As night came on, the soldiers built a fire in order to keep warm. Many of them wondered why so much care was taken to guard this particular tomb. The soldiers took their turn standing watch in front of the tomb, even though it seemed impossible that anyone would try to roll the stone away. It had been sealed securely, and yet they had been commanded to stand guard in order to make sure that nothing could possibly happen to disturb the body inside. During the night, the centurion in charge visited the tomb to see if his men were obeying orders, for he realized he would be held responsible if anything happened. He questioned the guard as to whether he had heard any strange sounds or had seen anything unusual, but the soldier reported that everything appeared to be in order. Because of the unusual circumstances, the soldier inquired of the centurion why it was so necessary to guard the tomb of a man who had been crucified like a common criminal. To this, the centurion quickly replied, "This man was no common criminal. I was there at Golgotha when he died. Believe me, if there is a God, I tell you this man was his son." It was early Saturday morning, the day after the crucifixion, and the city of Jerusalem was quiet. It was the Sabbath and no work was done on that day. That evening found the Roman guards as usual in front of the entrance to the tomb. The centurion and the captain made their rounds to make sure that everything was in order. By this time, the soldiers were beginning to relax their watch, for to them it seemed unnecessary to remain alert at such a place. Nothing seemed to happen. 1 hour followed another with heavy silence. But suddenly, in the early morning on the 3rd day, the soldier on duty was startled by the violent shaking of the earth. He was thrown against the side of the tomb. At the same time, the seal was broken and the heavy stone began to roll away from the entrance. Soldiers all around the tomb had been thrown to the ground by the violence of the shaking earth. They were frightened and confused and found it difficult to get to their feet. The captain arrived without delay and began to question the soldiers about what had happened. When the startled soldiers had recovered from the unusual experience, they approached the entrance of the tomb and looked inside. Early Sunday morning inside the city of Jerusalem, a light was burning in the upper room where the disciples had remained since the crucifixion, for fear of being arrested. The mother of Jesus and some of the other women, who also had been staying in the house, were making preparations to visit the tomb. Peter cautioned her to be careful because the soldiers were still looking for the followers of her son. As the sky brightened in the early morning hours, Mary and the women who were with her slowly approached the tomb where they had watched Joseph of Arimathea and his men lay the body of her son. They stopped for a moment and began to talk about the heavy stone that had been rolled across the entrance. They knew they could not move the stone by themselves and wondered if there would be anyone nearby to help them. But when they came to the place where the tomb was, they were amazed at what they saw. The great stone which had sealed the entrance had been rolled back. How did this happen? What could it mean? The women were shaken by their discovery, but moved closer to the entrance, wondering each moment what to expect, what to believe. What more could they have done to Jesus after they crucified him? They entered cautiously, but were shocked when they saw that the body of Jesus was gone. It was a time of deep sorrow and despair. In their grief, the women did not know what to think or what to do. Why anyone would take his body they could not even imagine. The mother of Jesus drew back in horror. There on the stone where Jesus had been placed were only the cloths in which his body had been wrapped, and at one side was the cloth which had covered his face. Suddenly they heard a heavenly voice. The words were clear and distinct. "Do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him." The voice, like that of an angel, continued to speak to the women. "Go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, as he told you." Obediently, the women went quickly to the upper room, where they told the disciples what they had seen and heard. Jesus had risen from the dead. He had risen as he said he would. Friday's sorrow had melted away with triumph of the Easter resurrection. Here ends this tape. Please rewind it to the very beginning.